Hi, I'm Jen and I'm an overwaterer. Hi everyone, my name is Jen and this is B-Sides of Plants, where we talk about these houseplant and home design. Welcome back. So today I want to talk to you about one of the most common plant problems, and that is overwatering. I am definitely an overwaterer, and I feel like a lot of people are. It's a really common problem because when we first bring plants into our home, we love it so much and we love them so much that we kind of become helicopter parents and smother them to death. But I've definitely gotten a lot better at it, so I want to share with you some practical tips on how I stopped overwatering. Tip number one. Tip number one is to write down every single time you water your plants. Obviously, this sounds like super tedious, but this was so helpful to me when I was first starting out, especially when I had a much smaller collection. So every time I brought a new plant into my home, I just watched a bunch of different care tip videos on YouTube about that plant and how it likes to be cared for. And then I noted information like whether or not this plant likes to stay on the moist side or whether or not they like to completely dry out. And then every time I watered, I went onto the notes section of my phone and wrote down the date on when I watered it. So sometimes when I was first starting out, I had kind of an issue figuring out what constitute as dried. And so I knew though that there's no possible way that this plant could have dried out in 3 days or 4 days. Like, it would have probably needed a week or so. So then I was able to check to see exactly when the last time I watered it, and if logically it sounded like I watered it too recently, then I wouldn't water it for another couple more days. Over time, I've definitely stopped doing this because my collection has really grown, and I've also been able to dial in more on figuring out when my plants need water. Over time, I feel like you just kind of figure it out. Like, you just pick up a pot and be like, yeah, this is dry, or see the difference in the leaf. But that definitely comes with owning a certain plant for an amount of time, and therefore being able to observe the different changes in the plant when it needs water. So I highly recommend writing down every single time you water your plants. Tip number two, which was very helpful to me when I was first starting out and I cared about my plants so much, is that if it's not time to water your plants yet, give them a mist. I don't really mist my plants anymore because I feel like it doesn't increase the humidity enough. And sometimes when you mist your plants, you kind of be careful. I wouldn't recommend you mist like in like midday when it's really hot and really sunny, or mist and then put it directly underneath the grow light, because sometimes that can actually end up burning your leaves if you leave water droplets and it's too close to a grow light or too close to the sun. It kind of burns and looks kind of like a sunburn. So I don't really mist my plants anymore, but I used to love misting my plants because it made me feel like I was doing something and I wasn't watering them. So highly recommend misting. This is a mister bottle from Urban Outfitters. I'll make sure to have it linked in the description below. It does produce like quite big droplets, but it's really pretty, and I have it on display in my shelf, so I really enjoy that. So if you can't water, mist. Tip number three. Tip number three is either to hang them up or put them up really high. Sometimes it really does take a physical barrier between you and your watering can. All of my plants that are in macrame hangers, I severely neglect them all the time because it's a hassle to water. You either have to like get out a chair or a ladder or something to get up there, or you have to take the plant completely down. And both of those things are kind of annoying to do. And so you are less likely to water your plants if they're up really high. So obviously I make sure that even though they're up high, they are getting adequate access to light, because that's definitely very important. But if I notice that I'm like kind of overwatering this plant or it's getting too much water, I definitely swap it out for one of the plants that are in my macrame hangers, and then, you know, the plants that are in there can come down and they get a little bit more love and TLC. So yeah, highly recommend macrame hangers, high shelf, etc. if you feel like you are watering your plants too often. Tip number 4 is to make your soil work for you. Change out your soil. If you watch my videos, I have a ton of videos where I'm repotting, and I always say that my mix is extra chunky, and that's because I'm an overwaterer. And if I make my mix extra chunky and I add in a lot of soil amendments that help with aeration, then it's much less of a concern for me about overwatering, because the soil just doesn't retain that much moisture. This obviously is a lot of work to switch out the soil for a lot of your plants, but I would definitely just, if this is a transition you want to make, every time that a plant needs to be repotted, I would just switch it to a better mixture, or a mixture that is more tailored to you. Even if you don't use all of the different soil amendments that I use, such as like pumice or orchid bark or etc., I would at the very least, if you're using potting soil, to add in perlite or pumice at the very least, because pure just 100% potting soil is definitely a recipe for overwatering. So yeah, definitely change out the soil or add in soil amendments that help with soil aeration. Another thing in terms of the same line, which is changing out the plant medium, is you can also decide to go soil free. I've been doing a lot of videos on LECA lately. I'll link my LECA playlist for you, and that's because LECA has really helped me fix my overwatering problem. My Sad Plant Club series, where I fix like sad looking plants in my collection, like probably 4 out of 5 times I'm transferring that plant into LECA. And that's not because LECA itself, the medium, is like a magical cure-all for plants. It's because if a plant in my collection is having a problem, it's likely an overwatering or an underwatering problem, and LECA kind of makes that so much easier and kind of streamlines it. If you don't know what LECA is, I have a lot of videos on it, but basically it is a lightweight expanded clay aggregate. So like these clay balls that have water, self-wicking water properties. So you can leave your LECA in a container of water and it'll just wick up water, and the plant can absorb as much water as it needs, versus you deciding for your plant how much water it needs when you're watering. So highly recommend either checking out LECA or other soil free alternatives like Lechuza Pond, or I don't know, there's others. So yeah, if this is like a problem across the board of all of your plants, then I would recommend switching out your soil. And the final tip number 5 is to simply get more plants. The more plants you have, the less time you have to devote for each single individual plant, and it will make you less of a helicopter parent. That's definitely what kind of happened to me. Over time, as I got more plants, I just had less time to look so closely at each plant, and I was able to just kind of like let them be, and that really helped my overwatering problem. Okay, those are all my tips, but don't go anywhere just yet because I have some bonus tips for you. Okay, so your bonus tip is to make sure that you have all the right tools to help you not overwater. So this, you've probably seen this. This is a moisture meter, and how it works is to check to see if your plant is in need of water or not. You just stick the moisture meter down and it'll be able to read to tell you whether or not your plant is moist or dry. But if you are seeing what I'm seeing, you'll know that this really only works if you haven't repotted your plant into a very chunky mix. How this probe works is that, okay, see, like this is not in a very chunky mix, this is in a pretty normal mix, and you can see that the meter does work. It's not a defect in the meter, it's about how this meter detects whether or not the soil is moist, and that's from surface tension. And if your mix is super chunky like mine is, there's no surface tension really, because it's, you know, it's just a bunch of bark, and so there's a lot of air, and so therefore it'll always detect your plant as dry. But if your soil mixture is still in either like the soil mixture that it came with, or you don't make your soil mixture as chunky as mine, this tool is super helpful. I loved it when I first got it because I was really finding out that my like scale of what is dry is not at all what is dry. When I looked at a plant and I stuck my finger down into the soil, anytime a plant is like a 6 or 7, I was already like, this plant is dry, but it's not. I stuck it in, and dry is not till a 3 or a 2, and the plant was reading like a 5 and a 6. So this was super helpful to me when I was first starting out. But with that disclaimer, I will link this down below. And then if you watch any of my videos, you know that I cannot stop talking about clear pots. I keep jabbering about these damn clear pots, but these pots changed my life. Because I wasn't able to use this anymore, I switched the majority of my collection over to clear pots. They are more expensive than regular nursery pots, but they are so freaking worth it because you can visually see when your soil is dry, and that is really helpful. Okay, so clear pots, and the last thing I'm going to talk about is making sure that you are choosing the right pots for your plants. So I love my plastic pots, but some people really love clay and terracotta. This is German clay, so it's like an off-white color. I have a bunch of these, and I have planted my peperomias directly into these terracotta pots, and that's because I keep having issues with peperomia where it's not that the root is getting too much water and like getting root rot. I keep getting stem rot with my peperomias, although I've significantly scaled back on my watering, so I've decided just to go ahead and plant them directly into these clay pots. Clay and terracotta, they tend to wick moisture out of the pot, and therefore anything you plant in these will dry out a whole lot a lot quicker than if you use plastic. I feel like for the majority of my collection, plastic works a little better. With my airy mixture plus the plastic, it kind of works out where in the summer most of my plants need watering about once a week, and in the winter about every other week, and that really works for me. I really like that pacing, and I also like being able to see the roots. So plastic pot plus airier mix works for me. You might decide otherwise. You might like to do a little bit of a less airy mix, but put it in terracotta. Up to you. They're your plants. And another option is a self-watering pot. Not all self-watering pots are created equally. When you're looking for a self-watering pot, you definitely want to make sure that the plant or the planter like inside has a lot of access to like air, so like a lot of holes, because you don't want it to just be like sitting in water, you know. This is a Wally Grow loop planter, and I have my Mandula pothos in it. I love this planter. I was very hesitant because I don't generally like self-watering planters. I feel like a lot of the times it just ends up that it's like a pot that's sitting in water. But I love this planter. There is a lot of holes. Let me see if I can pull it out without it like getting super wet. There's holes pretty much everywhere, and I just haven't had any issues with this planter, you know, getting root rot or acting like it's getting too much water, etc. And my plant looks so much happier in this planter than it was before. It was in a clay pot before and it looked miserable and dehydrated constantly. So I really, really love my Wally Grow planter. I paid for this myself, not sponsored, not an ad, not gifted. I paid for this. So yeah, so those are all of my tricks on how to help with overwatering. I hope this helps. I hope this was helpful to you. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.